Okay, welcome again. So the 2 versus 2 went pretty well yesterday, so my plan today is to do the same, and actually it just happened that we went Byzantine Ottoman, Byzantine Ottoman, which was kind of funny. I think this game shows how Byzantine is an overpowered civilization. Although, albeit, you know, one of the Byzantine players doesn't do quite as well as the other, but nevertheless, if you know how to use the early equipment that Byzantine offers, I do think it's a particularly strong civilization. I'll go kind of speed through the intro again as per usual. I've gone trade network this time because it's the very kind of tiny map. Just remind me what it's called. Haywire map. It's a tiny one. I've just decided, and I don't know whether this was the right decision, to not bother using mines and just save the wood, because that's not that far. I mean, the pro players will probably say that's a ridiculous idea, but I've decided to do that because it saves the wood and it saves the space. The space is at such a premium with this civilization, and I'm often up against enemies that push early, so I'm very much looking to defend early, and that's very difficult if you kind of have loads of buildings around. Unnecessary buildings around, such that I could get kind of farms instead of them as well. So that was my decision anyway. Slow it down a little bit. Sorry, I just thought I heard something. I'll slow it down a little bit. They're kind of building walls quite nicely. The enemy we are building no walls. I am very much aware of. My ally, this Byzantine civilization, I think it's called End of Game. It's doing pretty well, actually. So I'll just look at numbers quickly. 30 econ for me, military 1, obviously. That's pretty standard for me at this point. 29 military 3. So actually, no, about the same. In terms of income per minute, I'm doing quite well on food, which is very important early game. They're doing a lot of wood, which is interesting. Yeah. Okay. Never really understand oil and why oil gets mercenary units. Never for the Byzantine civilization. Haven't really got my head around that. I don't really understand what the logic is there. So I've got now a little mine up here. The idea being that I can create. I do this sometimes. I create a little kind of secondary civilization. Gone for one of the slightly bigger ones, haven't I? Yeah. Another example of mines disappearing, by the way. Reveal map. Reveal. If I reveal map, I can see that. If I don't, it's gone. Very odd. But I do like to have these kind of island groups or kind of clusters of buildings that are a little bit further away, and if you're playing an enemy that isn't particularly observant, that can go really well because it can give you an extra source, that extra boost of income, especially if there are... I've previously had a situation where they've managed to pretty much destroy my main base, but not entirely, and I've just fed troops in from a secondary area and have managed to turn the tide, which has done really well. I'm aware the sound might be clipping a little bit, so maybe I'll turn it down somewhat. Just, I think that might be a little bit better. Good. So, End of Game's doing pretty well, actually. I think they do pretty well this game. They've kind of already started to build this siege equipment that it's absurdly good with use of Greek fire. This is somewhat the bane of my life when playing the Byzantine civilization against me, because I'm so weak early game. It's very hard for me to defend against those trundly things. I think Byzantine have been nerfed recently, because I think the developers did realise that they're a bit too strong. Which is, I think, a good thing, but even so, you know, it's a pretty strong civilization if you know what you're doing. So, where are we at? I've, as I usually do, rushed Castle Age before everyone else. Allows me to start creating Janissaries. They've actually very, very early gone for the push. Hardened Limitani, and these, I'm not going to try and pronounce it. Javelin throws are also really good, especially because you can get them quite early game, as is being evidenced here. And they are, like, Janissary is really, really useful against villagers. They're also fairly cheap. No, that's not the right. Wait, how are they creating them? Oh, is this the mercenary house? Yeah, that's the mercenary house. I'm sorry, it looked similar to the barracks. Creating those javelin throws, pushing really nice and early. Let's see what the Byzantine civilization does in response. Actually, they're really struggling. It wasn't the kind of super close game apparently. Pretty much, this end of game player just dominated. Certainly, I wasn't strong enough, and I probably would have struggled against this push, to be honest. In fact, I would have definitely struggled against this push. It's very early, it's 13 minutes in. I've never, you know, maybe I'd have done a little bit, you know, a little bit better in terms of having outposts and whatever else, but I don't know. If you know, as I said, if you know what you're doing with Byzantine civilization, it can be very difficult to defend against. We've got a nice little group of horsemen there that are going to do some damage, I'd expect. Yeah. So with a nice charge of horsemen, that does help, does turn the tide a bit. Probably should have got the villagers involved, I would suggest. It's the only real... the Ottomans here as well should have got the villagers involved early in that defence. Taking out this siege is priority. I decide, you know what, I need to add my weight to this attack because I don't want my ally taking all the credit. Understandably so, I think. I didn't quite know what the situation was in terms of whether they still had a decent army other than these guys, but presumably not. But nevertheless, it's 14 minutes in. I normally wait for a few more minutes before I push, because obviously this is a tiny force. But there's no, you know, might as well coordinate the attack. I haven't even upgraded to blacksmith such that I can create battering rams though, so I'm having to create a siege workshop up here in a minute. Frantically getting some military units out as fast as possible to actually do something. It was a fairly, you know, it wasn't quite as good, you know, intense game as yesterday because of this impressive push by the end of game player, but still. So I get then pushed. God, I get this sandwich man trying to defend his base, which is fair enough. But by this point, their force has been dwindled down, or has been attacked enough by. Now these villagers should be attacking the mangonel really, otherwise they're just walking away and dying. So they don't have a serious enough force to combat this fairly limited attack. Which is, I don't know, not quite the game that I'd normally play. I do prefer, I have to say, having a nice clash later on. I don't know what they've done, why they did that, to be honest. They just walked into the enemy with the villagers. I guess, what else do? They could go that way. But that way is the shorter route, so maybe that makes more, they thought that made more sense. I mean, it's fair play for them for not just surrendering straight away. I wondered if there was anything up here I need to worry about, in terms of lots of villagers that are doing whatever else, so I decided to go up there before coming down and aiming all the fire on that town centre. But overall, good game, quick game. Not quite as close or intense as previous games, but nevertheless a nice demonstration of particularly what the Byzantine civilization can do early, and also a demonstration of how rubbish Janissaries are against buildings. It wasn't until siege units started going on those landmarks that anything started happening. Okay, I'll just leave it there.